Excuse me, this section is reserved. I have a reservation. Under what name? Mitchell, party of two.
The hostess looked me up and down, slowly, deliberately. Her eyes started at my shoes, simple flats, not designer. Moved to my dress, nice but off the rack. Landed on my purse, real leather but no visible logo. I watched her calculate my worth in under 3 seconds. I don't see that name here. Check again. MITCHELL 8 o'clock reservation. She didn't check again. She just smiled, that thin, practiced smile that says everything without saying anything. Perhaps you have the wrong restaurant. I didn't have the wrong restaurant. I knew exactly where I was. Le Bernardin, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. 3 Michelin stars, a 6-week wait list for regular reservations. And a hostess who had decided, in one glance, that I didn't belong. The reservation is under my husband's name, I said calmly. He'll be arriving shortly. Can I please wait at our table? I'm sorry, but we can't seat incomplete parties. Perhaps you'd like to wait at the bar. She gestured toward a small waiting area near the entrance. Not the bar. The waiting area. Where I'd be visible to everyone walking in. Where everyone could see the woman who wasn't good enough to sit down. I should have fought harder. I should have demanded a manager. But here's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't ask permission. It just floods in, takes over, makes you small before you realize what's happening. So I nodded. And I walked to the waiting area. And I sat down. The next 20 minutes were some of the longest of my life. I watched couple after couple walk in. Designer bags, expensive watches, that specific confidence that comes from never being questioned. The hostess greeted each of them warmly. First names, compliments on their outfits, immediate seating. And I sat there, invisible, checking my phone to look busy, pretending I couldn't hear the whispers. Is she waiting for someone, or maybe she's lost? This isn't really that kind of place, you know. That last comment came from a woman at a nearby table. She wasn't even trying to be quiet. Her husband laughed, and something inside me cracked. I want to stop here, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a revenge story, that my billionaire husband is about to walk in and put everyone in their place, that I'm going to have the last laugh. And maybe some of that is true. But that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because of what I felt in that chair. Before the vindication. Before the revelation. When I was just a woman being quietly destroyed by strangers who didn't know anything about me. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Rachel. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My father worked at a factory. My mother cleaned houses. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. I learned early that money was something you worried about, something you stretched, something that could disappear if you weren't careful. So I worked. Scholarships through high school, loans through college, 60-hour weeks through my 20s. By 32, I was a project manager at a tech company in New York. Not wealthy, but stable. Not impressive, but proud. I met Daniel at a coffee shop. Not a networking event, not a charity gala, not any of the places you'd expect to meet a billionaire. A coffee shop. He was in line behind me. I was taking too long to decide. He made a joke about analysis paralysis. I told him to mind his business. He laughed. And something sparked. Daniel didn't tell me who he was for 3 months. He said he worked in investments, which was technically true. He wore normal clothes, drove a regular car, lived in an apartment that was nice but not obscene. I fell in love with a man who remembered my coffee order, who texted back immediately, who listened more than he talked. I didn't fall in love with a fortune. I didn't even know there was one. The revelation came by accident. We were at his apartment, 6 months into dating. I was looking for a phone charger and opened the wrong drawer. Inside was a magazine. Forbes. Daniel's face on the cover. The quiet billionaire. How Daniel Mitchell built a $4 billion empire without anyone noticing. I sat on his bed for an hour, just staring at it. When he came home, I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just asked one question. Why didn't you tell me? He sat down across from me. And for the first time since I'd known him, he looked scared. Because I wanted you to see me. Not the money, not the company, not what I could give you, just me. And you didn't trust me to do that. I didn't trust anyone to do that, not until you. I wish I could say I understood immediately. But I was hurt. Angry. I felt deceived, even though he'd never technically lied. It took me 2 weeks to realize something. In those 2 weeks, nothing changed. He still texted the same way, still showed up the same way, still loved me the same way. The money didn't change who he was. And it didn't change who I was. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, 30 people, a beach in Maine. I wore a dress that cost $400. His family, old money, old expectations, was horrified. But Daniel didn't care. And eventually, neither did I. The thing about marrying into wealth is that everyone has an opinion about it. Some people assume you're a gold digger. Some people assume you'll change. Some people assume you don't belong. And no matter how many times you prove them wrong, there's always another test. Another room where you're not welcome. Another person deciding your worth based on what you're wearing. That night at Le Bernardin was supposed to be simple. Our 5-year anniversary. Daniel had a work dinner that ran late. He told me to go ahead, get settled, order some wine. I'll be 20 minutes behind you, 30 tops. I'll survive. You always do. I didn't expect the hostess to seat me immediately. I knew how I looked. I'd come straight from a long day. My hair wasn't perfect. My makeup was minimal. My dress was something I'd owned for years. I didn't look like someone who belonged in a 3-Michelin-star restaurant. But I also didn't expect to be treated like an intruder. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. Daniel was running later than expected. A deal was closing, something complicated. He texted, "I'm so sorry, 15 more minutes, I promise." I texted back, "Take your time, I'm fine." I wasn't fine. The woman at the nearby table was getting louder. Her name was Victoria. I'd heard her husband use it. She was the kind of woman who wore her wealth like armor. Every piece of jewelry was a statement. Every word was a performance. And for some reason, I had become her entertainment. Do you think she's a coat check girl on break? She didn't even look at me when she said it, just loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough to deny. Her friends laughed. And I sat there, hands folded, eyes down, wondering why I still couldn't move. I could have left. I should have left. But there was something holding me in that chair. Not stubbornness. Something deeper. The little girl from Ohio who was told she'd never belong in rooms like this. The young woman who worked 60-hour weeks to prove she was good enough. The wife who still, after 5 years, sometimes wondered if she deserved any of it. That's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't just hurt in the moment. It reaches back, finds every wound you thought had healed, and rips them open again. 52 minutes. I had been sitting in that waiting area for almost an hour. The hostess had stopped looking at me entirely. Victoria was on her 2nd bottle of wine and her 5th joke at my expense. And I was about to stand up and leave. Finally. And then the door opened. Daniel walked in like he always did. No fanfare, no
Mr.
entourage,
Mitchell,
no
we
announcement.
weren't expecting.
My wife should already be
Just a
seated.
man in a well-fitted suit, looking around for his wife. The hostess's face transformed. "Mr. Mitchell, we weren't expecting." My wife should already be seated. Rachel Mitchell, where is she? I watched her face go white. There must have been a confusion with the reservation. We didn't. Where is she? He spotted me before she could answer. in the waiting area, sitting alone, like someone who had been left behind. I've seen Daniel angry before, but never like this. He walked toward me, past the hostess, past the tables, past Victoria and her friends who had suddenly gone very quiet. He knelt down beside my chair. How long have you been sitting here? It doesn't matter. How long? Almost an hour. He stood up, and he turned toward the hostess. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. My wife has been sitting in your waiting area for an hour, while these tables sat empty. Mr. Mitchell, I apologize. There was a miscommunication. There was no miscommunication. There was a judgment. The room had gone silent. Every table, every guest, every server. All watching. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Do you know what my wife did before she met me? She worked her way through college. She built a career on her own. She accomplished more before 30 than most people do in a lifetime, and she did it without anyone handing her anything. He paused. What have you done, besides judge people by their handbags? The hostess started to cry. I should have felt vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt tired. Daniel, I said quietly, let's just go. We're not going anywhere. We have a reservation. I don't want to eat here anymore. Then they're going to listen while you tell them why. He pulled me to my feet, gently, like I was something precious. And he turned me toward the room. All those people who had watched me be humiliated. All those people who had said nothing. Who had laughed. Who had looked away. Tell them, Daniel said. Tell them what you're feeling right now. Daniel, you've been silent for an hour. You don't have to be silent anymore. I looked at the room. At Victoria, whose face was now the color of chalk. At her husband, who was suddenly fascinated by his napkin. At the servers who had walked past me like I was furniture. At the hostess who had dismissed me with a glance. And I realized something. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to humiliate them back. I wanted them to understand something they'd probably never thought about before. I grew up without money, I said. My voice was shaking, but clear. I didn't have designer clothes. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a last name that opened doors. I paused. But I had dignity. I had worth. I had value. Not because of what I could buy, not because of who I knew, but because I was a human being. I looked at Victoria. You don't know anything about me. You looked at my dress and decided I was nothing. You made jokes at my expense like I couldn't hear you, like I didn't matter. She looked away. But here's what you didn't know. I'm the same person I was an hour ago, before my husband walked in, before you knew his name, before any of this. I let that sit. The only thing that changed is your perception, and that says everything about you, and nothing about me. The room was silent. Not the awkward silence of people who didn't know what to say. The heavy silence of people who were being forced to see themselves. Daniel took my hand. We're leaving, he said. He looked at the hostess. I own 14% of the company that owns this restaurant. By tomorrow morning, you'll be looking for a new job. Not because you didn't recognize me, but because you looked at another human being and decided they weren't worth your respect. We walked out. Into the cold New York night. Into a world that suddenly felt different. Daniel held me while I cried. Right there on the sidewalk. Not from sadness. From release. From finally, after an hour of swallowing it, letting it all out. I'm sorry I was late, he said. It's not your fault. I should have been there. You can't always be there. That's not the point. Then what is? I pulled back, looked at him. The point is that I shouldn't need you there for people to treat me like a human being. That's the truth I walked away with that night. Not the vindication of watching them squirm. Not the satisfaction of Daniel putting them in their place. The sad, simple truth that my worth, in the eyes of strangers, depended on who I was standing next to. I wish I could tell you things are different now. That I don't still get those looks. That people don't still make assumptions. But that would be a lie. I've been in rooms where women clutch their purses when I walk in. Where hosts check my reservation twice. Where people assume I'm the assistant, not the guest. And every time I have a choice. Let it shrink me. Or let it remind me who I really am. Daniel and I went to a diner that night. After the crying, after the sidewalk, after everything. We sat in a booth that had duct tape on the seats. Ordered pancakes at 10 p.m. And laughed until our sides hurt. This is better, I said. It really is. No one here cares who you are. No one here cares who either of us is. That's the point. The waitress came by. Refilled our coffee without being asked. Called me honey without irony. Didn't look at my shoes once. And I felt, for the first time in hours, like myself. Here's what I want you to take from this. The way people treat you when you have nothing to offer them, that's who they really are. The respect that only comes with status, that's not respect. That's calculation. And the worth you feel when someone sees you, really sees you, that's the only worth that matters. You've probably been in a room like that restaurant. Maybe not as fancy, maybe not as public, but a room where someone made you feel small, where your value was calculated in a glance, where you were dismissed before you could even speak. And maybe you're still carrying that with you, still shrinking yourself, still waiting for someone to walk in and prove that you matter. But you don't need a billionaire husband to have worth. You don't need a designer bag to deserve respect. You don't need anyone's permission to take up space. You are enough. Right now. In whatever you're wearing. With whatever is in your bank account. You are enough. And anyone who can't see that, that's their poverty. Not yours. This is Reality Voice. If you've ever been the person in the waiting area, invisible, dismissed, doubted, then you know exactly what this story is about. Leave a comment. Tell me about a time someone made you feel small and how you found your way back to yourself. And if you're still here, still sitting with this, maybe it's time to subscribe. Because these stories aren't about billionaires and fancy restaurants. They're about the quiet battles we all fight. The ones that happen in glances and silences. The ones that stay with us long after the moment passes. How do people treat you when they don't know who you are?